Assalamu alaikum, and we are back live on Salam Media with the mid morning talk show with myself, Rashida Khan. And I'm privileged and honored to have our next guest on the show, Irfaan Mangera. Irfaan is a founding member of Rise Mzansi and is a member of its National Leadership Collective. He's an activist, organizer, human rights educator, and community builder. He served as the Youth Activism Program Manager at the IM-PACT Foundation prior to taking up formal politics. But we're not going to go into his very, very long bio. He's asked me not to. I do want to say, though, that he's won lots and lots of awards, specifically the Hani Gluckman Award for Outstanding Contribution to Community Education, with emphasis on the disadvantaged groups. So I really think that that gives a very brief introduction to this amazing young man. I've had the privilege of meeting him recently at another workshop that we collectively involved in, and I did had to do a little bit of research on him recently. So I thought, no, he's the ideal person to talk to today. So before anything, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the show, Irfaan.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me, Rashida, and Salam Media. Always a pleasure being here.
Wonderful. So before anything, I want to say that you like to say that you're committed to a just and equal world where all human beings can live with dignity. And I mean, it's amazing that we have to actually state this these days, but it should be the norm for all of us. You
Yeah,
yourself have been working in the activist sector for most of your life, for most of your short life. I don't know if you mind me telling just how old you are, just how young you are, Irfaan. I believe
sure.
Irfaan is just 28 years old, and
That,
he's done way more than most people who have done at 88, I would imagine. But you've been working as an activist in the activist sector for most of your life. What inspired you, and how did your early experiences shape you?
Thank you so much, Rashida. You honor me, but honestly, I'm humbled. I think this life of activism and this commitment to a just future started with recognizing the family I come from, the community I come from. And so I always start by introducing myself as Irfaan Mangera of the Mangeras of 14th Street, Fitas, because my family was one of those that were forcibly removed in the 1970s to Lenasia. And I start there because, yes, there might have been an origin story in my teens, but that in itself is a rootingness of the ideas of justice, of solidarity, of community building that my family instilled in me. And so I carried forward as part of their legacy. Growing up, in Lane's schooling at Al Aqsa, you often would come across the disparities that existed in the community, and particularly in the south of Johannesburg, which is the poorest of the region of the city. And staring informal settlements in your face also gives you a perspective that life isn't the same for everyone. And so for
Mm-hmm.
me, inequality started there, just questioning, thinking about this in a bit more depth as I grew older. And thankfully, I had good teachers who also encouraged me to volunteer and participate in programs like that of Sanzaf or Al Imdad Foundation very young. And that rootedness, working with orphanages, working with community centers, then started getting me more involved and passionate about young people. And subsequently, by the time of 16, age of 16, I was elected to Crescent's Cricket Club,
Mm-hmm.
one of the oldest non-racial clubs in the country. And that moment was a powerful one because for the first time, it wasn't just a placement. I had
Mm-hmm.
mobilized young people to play cricket. And over the space of having 8 players to leaving the club with 4 full squads and 2 junior teams by the time I had left was a result of mobilizing, getting young people engaged in sport and activity that were not, the many other social vices that exist. And so that's sort of the formative stages of my activism life. I do think the 28 years has been quite fulfilling in different aspects because, from charity to organizing to political work, there's been various aspects of my story that I hope people find inspiration from a particular perspective that you don't have to feel powerless
Mm-hmm.
in the face of such systemic violence, where you being, you don't have the right to work, you don't have the right to dignity, you have the ability to act wherever you are. And for me, that has been the consistent story, is that it's not just this glamorous, I'm leading with some
Mm-hmm.
bold perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
lead with where you are, lead where you can, and that in itself will help shape society differently.
Yeah, I'm, the more I learn about you, the more impressed I am. And I, th- I just want everyone to understand, every young person to understand that you have a role to play, and maybe not everybody is going to be as prolific as you have been, but everybody can do something small. Everybody can do something little to try and make the world a better place. And I think it's incredible that you've had the family support and the support from your school and teachers. The other thing I want to just briefly touch on is that the fact that your education. So you've got degrees in education and education policy, right? You also have a strong academic background. How has your education influenced your approach to activism, leadership, and youth development? And how has your family background contributed to this? Do they work together?
They do. They intersect quite interestingly, because there are
Hmm.
many teachers in my family, and when I speak family, my background is my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, very big family, and we're close knit in that sense. And so, growing up with such an environment, but then also the activism very young, the passion for young people grew. And by the time I had reached matric, I was part of the Kathrada Foundation's leadership program, which is a year long, at that time was a year long cohort based program. I had met the likes of Kathrada, Ahmed Kathrada, Lalu Isuchiba, and many of the veterans of our struggle. And I think it was in that year that it really clicked that I want a life of purpose. And I applied to be a teacher as my first choice, because I felt that that was the right thing to do. And the context of our communities that place so much of emphasis on academic pursuits, particularly in high fields where you can earn a good living, etc.
Hmm.
I think my family quite distinctively, and I remember my dad also speaking about this, saying, we want to support you doing what you want. And so
Hmm.
I was quite happy that that support was there. But by the time first year university happens, Fees Must Fall breaks out. And
Hmm.
this is a national movement of young students protesting for better access to quality decolonized education. And as a young kid, I mean, I'm 19. I get off the bus from Lens, and that in itself was an experience of inequality, because you have to leave at 5 or 6. There's no
Hmm.
buses after that. And
Hmm.
so, getting off that bus, I went to a group of leaders trying to block the entrance to WITS. Suddenly got involved, and since then, I think there was a big political shift in my head of this consciousness that we really have to push for systemic change. And
Absolutely.
my 4 years undergrad, 2 years part-time honors in education, leadership management, and policy helped shift that, because I basically said to myself that if I go to a school, I can create impact with a classroom of young people. But I think there's a broader mission now where South Africa needs systemic change to get this democracy working for all young people, and not just those who are privileged enough for particular access. So the shift then happened where I got sort of used that education background, joined the
Hmm.
Kathrada Foundation, and built the new youth program, which was about getting at least 100 youth clubs active in society in honor of Kathrada's legacy. And this was really, how do we teach and popularize civic education and
Hmm.
this sense of duty that I can actually contribute to society. And being a teacher helped. I think most people meet me and think that I studied politics or IR, but actually teaching was the roots of this. And you'd find the legacy of many of the anti-apartheid veterans who were teachers. And
Yes. Okay, thanks for that, Irfan. I seem to have lost your audio for a second. If you could just check, the producer's checking for me. But I can comment on what you've said. I personally love teachers. I love the idea of teach, and I think if I had to go back in my life and restudy or reconsider a career, I would consider teaching. At the time, though, when I was very young, I was a real hothead, and I was the last person who would make a good teacher because I was very, very impatient, and that wasn't a consideration for me. But of course, I would have wanted to do journalism or consider writing. But yeah, I believe that teaching is a noble profession. You know, yesterday I happened to be speaking to a couple of days ago, I happened to be speaking to my sister-in-law who is a teacher, and we were talking about how Ramadan is going. And she's saying, you know, this Ramadan, I'm finding it so difficult because it's a busy time of year. You know, it's towards the end of term, and it's such a busy time of year. And recently we've been lucky in that some parts of Ramadan have actually been in the holidays. And this year there's we fasting almost right till the end, so it's really difficult. And I said to her, and she was like complaining that she doesn't have enough time to do her ibadah. And I said, well, make your work, make the intention of your work as ibadah. To teach is such an amazing, wonderful thing. To be able to impart knowledge, to shape young minds, make your intention of ibadah even when you're doing work, and inshallah you will get all the rewards. So yeah, if teachers are listening in, maybe consider that. Assalamu alaikum. Are you back, Irfan?
I am. I don't know if there was my internet that crashed, but I'm
Okay.
back. Apologies.
Thank you for that. No worries. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to go on to the next question. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing South Africa's youth today?
So I can speak to the systemic ones of
Mm-hmm.
unemployment, where young people, at least 60% of young people are
Mm-hmm.
unemployed. But I really want to move away from just, broad stroke engagement. I want to speak about, very specific things that have tangible impact on society. And young people are concerned because,
Mm-hmm.
one, education and not having access to proper skills development programs limit your ability to actually find work, get meaningful, dignified work. There
Mm-hmm.
are at least 4 million or close to 4 million young people who we categorize as NEET, not in education, any form of employment or training. Now, NEET is a very big problem, because what does that mean is that there are almost 4 million young people who we don't know where they are. We know where they are, we just don't know what they do day to day. And that's
Mm-hmm.
a society that showcases lack of care and interest and investment in young people.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is that, one, also in that number is a lot of young people, who at least 200,000 young people who are dropping out of school before they finish matric. Now, this is annually. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to ask ourselves, where are those young people? Are those, and for what reason are they dropping out? For some, it's violence. For some, it's child dead at homes. For others, they are young people who are forced, because of the economic standing and status, to leave school to find work so that they can help their families put food on the table. Now, this is a society that is cracking. And so I think the broad unemployment crisis is linked to this, because down the line, that young person is unable, doesn't have a matric, is unable to work meaningful jobs because they have no skills certificate or practical skills that can earn them a living. And so we've designed our architecture of this economy has just been designed so wrong, and that, yeah, we're failing young people every single time we try to do things without actually addressing its core. Additionally to that, I'd speak about, so in the education broad stroke, we have at least only 6% of young people who actually have access to tertiary education. So how many community-based programs are we investing in? And that's a worry for young people, because
Mm-hmm.
we want opportunity. There's a hunger for wanting to build a life of dignity, so I don't have to rely on a grant. And I think that's something that consciously more and more people are starting to address and work towards, to say we need to get young people working, because there's not, you and I know, we come from
Mm-hmm.
communities where there's no shortage of work.
Mm,
There's potholes, there's lights unfixed, there's
for sure.
plumbing undone at certain public facilities in our communities, paint work, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things that can be invested in, and we need to think now outside of the box to how do we create a structural answer, but also that's complementary from a local level upwards, because each of us can create programs. I mean, I started
Yes.
a program myself, but I think one of the key things here in this conversation is that education helps spur on and deal with the unemployment one, But speaking to the other section of unemployment that we often don't get is that there's a mismatch between some of the skills programs and the kind of um, economic
Services that you need.
markets and services that are needed. So young people
Mhm.
are, yes, you might be trained, but then you are not able to find work because that sector is not hiring that type of skill. And then we have to import these skills from outside of the country. So that is in itself a major worry for young people, jobs and education. Outside of that is the peripheral ones that you can speak about that are a result of this trauma and this experience, which is addiction to things like drugs and alcohol,
Mhm.
other things that young people want and are concerned about, access to safe play areas, safe and secure environments where you can engage your community, build community with your friends and family, like recreation activities. But for the majority, a lot of our community centers are dysfunctional. There's not
Mhm.
enough incentive to have that kind of space built, and partly on the lines of spatial injustice because communities are not invested in and they were designed to exclude. So to redress that type of architecture, you really have to look back at and how it was designed and reconfigure that from the beginning. So yeah, I mean, just a snapshot on some of the key issues I
Yes.
think people are faced with.
I'm sure we could continue talking for a long time, but thank you for those insights. We have a lot of work to do, and I think everybody needs to pull together, pull up our sleeves, and get going and getting this sorted. I feel it's important um, to be proactive, to stop complaining and start doing. So I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. I know that whatever you wherever you land or whatever you're going to be doing, I didn't even get a chance to talk about your new opportunity, but inshallah I will have you back soon because I think there's lots more to talk about. Unfortunately, time's up and we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, and inshallah all of that you hope and dream for yourself, for all the youth of South Africa, for this beautiful country. May it all come to pass, inshallah. Ameen. Jazakallah
Um,
khair.
Jazakallah khair, and let us continue to rise in hope and not despair. Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much. I think